Hi, my name is Julia with juliarayphotography.com, and today I'm going to show you how I edit most of my portrait photos. Obviously, this would change with who's in the portrait, the background elements, anything else of that nature, but this is just some of the basics I do. So I've opened up my photo in Camera Raw, and I've adjusted it how I liked, and now it's open in Photoshop, and I'm on the background layer. First thing you always do is copy the background layer. You don't want to work directly on your photo. So that's Apple J. Now I'm working on layer 1 because layer 1 is selected. So typically the first thing I do is touch up the skin. I touch up the skin with the healing brush tool, which is J. It's the second one, and the second one is different from the first healing brush tool because it allows you to define your source point. So you hold down Alt, select your source point, and then you cover what you want covered. So you want your source point to be a nice patch of skin. And what you're covering is like a blemish or an imperfection. So this is how I edit the skin. You always want to choose different source points located near what you want to cover. You don't want to have just one source point for the whole process, and you don't typically want to use the same source point twice in a row next to each other just because it creates a kind of pattern. Another thing about this tool that's different than the stamp tool or the patch tool is that it blends the pixels nicely, whereas the stamp tool and patch tool just replaces the pixels. So I use this on all the skin. Oh, that looks bad. So Apple Z undoes one of the thing, undoes, and then you have to go back in the history to do more than one. Looks a little better. So you can also cover hair that's like on the face, like I'm doing now. And you can re-go over the same areas. And your new areas can be a source point too, a new source point, and it will be blemish-free source point, if that made sense. I don't know if that made sense. Okay, so obviously I have way more skin to cover. But for tutorial's sake, I'm going to move on and show you another step that I do. Okay, so I use the healing brush tool for skin, but for like this hair on the background, which is a distracting element for me, it may not be for you, I use the stamp tool. The stamp tool is the same in the healing brush tool as it allows you to define a source point. So you just define your source point and you click away. So this background's kind of weird, but if you can't see, there's like a kind of a pattern here, but that's just because of the source point. And a way to fix that would be to have a smaller brush and just do really small stamps. But for tutorial's sake, I'm just going to show you how it works. So that's how that works. And then I would also do it over here with the green. This is kind of a cool. I had my 50 on, so that's why it's so blurred back here, which is a really cool element, and it helps with editing, obviously, because it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so I would get really close to the skin. I'd make my brush smaller and do that. But another thing I do is I make teeth whiter, and how I do that is I use the sponge tool, which is O, and you just run once over the teeth, no more than once. And then after the sponge tool, you immediately use the dodge tool, and this is what really whitens the teeth. It desaturates the image. Very lovely. So that's a before and after, The teeth are much whiter. Okay, so another thing I do is I brighten the eyes. So I add a vibrance, I add an adjustment, I add exposure, which is under the adjustments panel. So you overexpose the image. So I'm going to overexpose it until I like how the eyes look. You don't want to do it too much, but I like how that looks. Okay, so after that, obviously the rest of the image is way overexposed. So if you click in this layer mask, you use black and white to allow you to see through what you want. So I'm going to paint the layer mask completely black, and it goes back to how it was. Does that make sense? Before it was white, and you could see the exposure affected everything. But once you paint it black, it affects nothing. So I want the exposure to affect the eyes. So I'm going to use X to switch to white, hit B to use my brush tool, make my brush smaller using the brackets, which are found above the enter on the keyboard. I want my opacity relatively high, not completely 100%, because then you'll be able to see brush strokes in the eyeballs. Okay, that looks nice. This looks nice. Okay, so before, after, before, after, before, after. I'm going to go over it one more time because my opacity is not all the way 100%. It will get a little bit brighter. There. I like that. It looks very nice. Okay, so again, before, after, before, after. I'm going to merge these two layers by holding Shift, selecting both, Apple E, that'll merge them. And one of the last things I like to do is add like a vignette to the background. So I'm going to do that by copying this layer first, Apple J. So I'm working on the copy, using my brush tool and black with a very big brush, hardness at 0%, you want it very soft, and like the opacity at 18%. I typically do it less than 20% always, 18%, 14% are like some of my favorite numbers to use, and I literally just brush over the image with black. I don't brush over her skin or hair or face, but I do brush the background. That just like darkens the image and it draws more attention to her. So that is basically it. I would also use color correction though using the wand tool. I showed you how to do that last week by selecting all the skin. I will link that tutorial below this video so you guys can watch that, but that is how I edit my photos. So I'm going to show you a before and after. Here's before, here's after, before, after. So I think it turned out really nice. I've gone in and edited the background more and touched up her skin even more so than what I showed you guys. So this is true before and after. Thanks so much for watching. Check back in for more tips and tricks from JuliaRayPhotography.com. See you next Tuesday.